Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got Christian Simmons on with us again to talk a little bit about this UF game coming up this weekend. Christian, thank you for joining me, man. How you doing?
Yeah, thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for jumping on. You're a big man to come in and do this after the game on Saturday. I was thinking it would go a different direction, but it didn't. But listen, a chance to right the wrongs, to right the ship. We appreciate BetUS for their support. We'll talk about them in just a moment. But man, we were talking about this before. It's hard to know. Like, does UCF have the more glaring issues than we just realized? Is Colorado maybe a lot better than we realized? I mean, they certainly played probably the best game under Deion Sanders yet. As good as that TCU game was last year and everything else, like just a very, very complete game on all sides of the ball. And so it's probably a little bit of both, but just big picture takeaways after that Colorado debacle.
Yeah, I do think it's a little bit of both is the answer. We talked about last week the UCF minus 15.5 was crazy to begin with. I never thought that was going to happen. Did I think UCF was going to suffer their first blowout defeat at home in 9 years, the first one since the 2015 season where they went winless? No, I did not see that coming. But yeah, UCF fans are shell shocked right now. This is the most upset I've seen the fan base in many years, and I think it's just sort of the symbolic nature of it happening at home and to a team they really wanted to beat. But like you said, I think it's a little bit of both. UCF on offense, Colorado loaded up the box just like Deion said they would. They put Travis Hunter on UCF's best receiver, and that really messed with UCF on defense. They just could not get pressure on Shedeur, and when you can't get pressure on Shedeur, he's going to find guys downfield. And it was really just those two things were the recipe that Colorado just really ran away with that game.
How much does it worry? Like, thoughts on the way, the offense didn't look super fluid. Now there were some turnovers like that, Travis made a great interception at one point. There was an interception in the end zone. Sometimes great players are going to make great plays. How much does it worry for UCF's offense that, and here's the big question for me, not to pour salt right into an open wound, but Colorado not historically known, or historically like last 16 games, not really known for having a great defense. And I think they played better at times this year. But for UCF that did have kind of a high-flying, high-powered offense to go up against what's typically thought of as not a very good defense and struggle that much, I know that you don't have the $1 million answer to this question, but does that feel like more of a blip to you? Does that feel like, oh no, panic time to you? Like, you're allowed an off game. Are you thinking that's all that was, or are you thinking there's something more there?
So what it really came down to is run first almost doesn't fully describe what it is they like to do. They have one of the deepest for sure running back rooms in the country. And what they want to do every game is they want to run the ball. They only ever really want to throw just to keep things open for the run. And Colorado was very upfront about their strategy was to load the box and try to stop the run. And UCF is one of their big weaknesses that has emerged on offense this season is they really are a one receiver team. They have Kobe Hudson, who's excellent, and there's a pretty big drop off to everyone else. Xavier Townsend's good, but a little more hit or miss, and that's kind of it. The room really thins out there. And when you have the best player in college football covering your one receiver in a one receiver offense and they're loading the box on you, it makes things difficult. And it was definitely a come down to earth moment for KJ Jefferson after leading the comeback against TCU because he just couldn't really do enough through the air to sort of open things up for RJ in the running game. But also hurt that Miles Montgomery, who's their RB2, was injured and missed the game. And he's a guy who really helps take some of the heat off Harvey and let him get a rest. And some of the other guys there didn't quite step up. But it's a concern because your concern that you look at there is, yes, okay, Kobe Hudson's not going to have Travis Hunter on him every game. But you wonder did Colorado just reveal the roadmap for how you limit this UCF offense? So I think that's the concern going forward.
Sure. They've got a chance to bounce back. And really no better opponent from a mindset standpoint. I don't know that you want to take an SEC opponent on the road after having this, but from a mindset standpoint, like it can all get wiped out with a win this weekend. So we'll talk about UF. Now this is crazy, and I want to ask your opinion on it in just a moment, but the spread in this game has gone from UF opening as like a 2.5, 3-point favorite to all the way to UCF, like a 6-point swing all the way to where UCF's like a 2.5 or 3-point favorite here. I want to ask you about that. First, I want to give some love to BetUS. If you're a UCF fan or if you're a UF fan, you can certainly go right now to BetUS and use our code YouTube150 to get 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit. Your next two deposits are at 125%. All of that up to $2,000. We appreciate BetUS for their support, and go hit that UCF UF line. It is moving and moving fast. So, Christian, what are your thoughts just on that, on the fact that the line has moved drastically in that direction?
Yeah, we're 2 weeks into the UCF line doing crazy things now, so I don't know what's going on there every week. But it's listen from just X's and O's aside for a second, from just an energy perspective and a team morale perspective, I think I would have liked it a little more for UCF if that line had stayed with them as the underdogs. I think if you're coach Gus Malzahn, you want to pitch. We're the underdogs. No one believes in us after that game. Let's go in the swamp and show them. I don't think you want Florida's coaches being able to say to their team, "Look at this. They're coming into our house favorite." I don't know. It's like you wonder. I mean, we know that players, it depends on the player, but some of them do notice that stuff. And I think I liked it a little more from a morale angle if UCF had stayed the underdog. But it's weird. I don't know what to make of it. It's this. I think I actually don't think anyone knows what to make of this game, which is part of what's going on.
Yeah. I remember in 2015, and obviously I have a very specific frame of reference for this, but in 2015, Florida opened up as a 3-point favorite when Florida State was coming to town. And obviously that's the last game of the year. Florida was a 10-win team that year and was kind of fake good because we ended up blowing them out, and then they got blown out in the championship game and then in their bowl game too. So they were kind of fake good. The East wasn't good. Georgia stunk back then, and but it was before Kirby. And so I saw the same thing happen then, and we ended up as a 3-point favorite after they started as a 3-point favorite. And so I don't know if history tells you anything. Maybe that'll be a good thing for you guys, another team in the state of Florida that is going in there. You mentioned, we'll start maybe with defense first. Florida's defense, which is not very good. In fact, ranks behind even Colorado's, which is thought of as a bad defense in a lot of advanced analytics. And Florida's defensive line, really, really bad. Like, again, was the roadmap laid out? Maybe. Can they be effective in executing? I'm not sure. And I know Florida doesn't have the defensive backs. They're very banged up at safety. They don't have a Travis Hunter. To be fair, no one else does, but they don't necessarily love their corners either. And so I do think it's an opportunity you saw a Mississippi State team absolutely do what they wanted. I think Mississippi State scored 28 and got stopped on a 4th and goal from like the 3. Very easily could have been 35 points that the Bulldogs put up. You would think if there was a defense that could get UCF back on the right track, it might be in Gainesville this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, you hit the nail on the head right there because obviously UCF wants to run the ball, and this is a Florida running defense that ranks 109th in the nation, and UCF wants to be able to take advantage of that. And what you just said is right there. The difference maker is I don't think that Florida right now has the DBs to just take UCF's passing game out of the situation. And as long as UCF can throw the ball a little bit, as long as Kobe Hudson can get his, that is going to open up things for the run game. And this is a rushing attack that is very, very difficult to stop. I mean, RJ Harvey quote unquote, had his worst game against Colorado. He still rushed for 77 yards and about 5 yards a carry and had 92 yards through the air as well. It's like you can slow, but you can't stop. And and that's what UCF is hoping they'll bank on. I mean, you looked at Mississippi State, who just came in and ran the ball like crazy, something that they had not had success with before that game. You're hopeful that UCF can mimic that and have that success. I mean, it's kind of a weird situation to be talking about. Just sort of take a step back and say, yeah, UCF might have an easier time against Florida's defense than they did against Colorado's. That's where we're at somehow. But yeah, that's the hope for sure.
I do think that if there's one bright spot on their defense, I think they like the way that Pup Howard's played. I think they like some of their linebackers. I think they do they like one of their corners. I'll say that. Certainly not to the level of Hunter, but I do think they kind of like the linebacker play in spots. And so to me, that's a really interesting matchup is if the lines kind of cancel out, or if UCF's line can kind of overtake where UF's line is. Can Harvey and some of those running backs and KJ, can they run well enough and break that one tackle in the second level, right? With the linebackers to really turn those 4-yard gains into 7, 8, 9, 12 yard gains. And I think that's a big difference because I do think if it's a small bright spot for UF's defense, but if there is one, I do think they like the linebackers. And to me, that's a really, really important matchup is how do UCF's backs match up with that level of play at Florida?
For sure. And RJ Harvey, you feel great about that. That's what RJ Harvey is best at. He's going to thrive in that situation, but it can't just be Harvey. This can't be one offensive player beats UF. And this is a game where it's so funny because I feel like you probably don't get a lot of teams say, yeah, it really sucks that we're down our RB2, but that it does matter for UCF that Miles Montgomery is out. There was Gus had a kind of update on him this week. It doesn't sound like he's going to be back this weekend. And the reason Miles Montgomery is so valuable is because he's kind of a plug-and-play version of RJ Harvey. He's a very, very similar player from his style of play and his talent that allows RJ to rest, that allows him to stay fresh. You plug in Montgomery. Penny Boone and Johnny Richardson, the two other backs, they use a lot of very different types of players. Johnny Richardson's more of your one-gear speed guy, and Penny Boone's more of your bruising guy. So they're good for different situations, but it's just having Miles in there would have had me feel a little bit better because he is another guy who can sort of turn a 4-yard gain into a 15-yard gain, and I do think it's just a little more burden on RJ that they're not going to have that.
KJ ran all over UF last year by design, on scrambles, on broken plays, just whatever. Like, I think he still might be running from that game. How much do you think they intentionally try and run KJ in this?
Man, it's going to be interesting. And honestly, I think that KJ's most recent performance in the Swamp is what UCF fans are holding on to right now, because things are rough among the UCF community after that game, and people are hopeful that they can take advantage of that. I think we're going to see KJ run a lot. And I think it's going to be, I mean, they're loving using him in the design runs. That's no surprise. There was a play, listen, like if you want to watch some good UCF plays from Colorado, I swear there were like 3 or 4, and one of them was KJ just absolutely trucking a defender on his way into the end zone. I mean, they know how to use him in that situation. He's not a new player. He's been around for 5 years. They know what he can do against SEC defenses that we've seen. I think that's definitely going to be an emphasis. I mean, I think we're going to see the ball on the ground a ton, which is not a surprise, but I think that's what we're going to see.
So looking at UF's offense, they've, terrible against Miami, which, Miami seems to be a pretty good team. Not great against A&M. Found a little something against Mississippi State. Again, Mississippi State, maybe the worst team in the SEC, even behind Vandy. So it's hard to, Auburn could lose with the best of them too, I guess. So, but certainly in the bottom tier, there is the Lagway factor. I don't know how effective he truly will be, and Napier seems to mismanage that quarterback rotation stuff. But just thoughts on, Mertz, Lagway, Napier rotating, just what UCF's defense will look like on Saturday. I certainly don't think that UF has the same kind of talent that Colorado has at wide receiver, at quarterback. I think the running backs might be a little bit better at UF. But just thoughts on how UCF's defense matches up.
So we'll drop a take, and then people can come back and tell me I was an idiot if it doesn't pan out. But if UCF loses this game, it is going to be because of their defensive line. That's my take for this one, because Florida's offense, it feels like an offense that you should be able to stop. It's an offense that has already been stopped throughout the season. And yeah, I'm not overly concerned about the whole preparing for 2 quarterbacks thing, because as you said, they've implemented Lagway in a strange way. It's almost like they've I don't know. It has not made sense the way they've gone about that. And
they've told people what they're going to do. Like, hey, he's going to come on the 3rd, 6th, and 9th possession. You're like, why would you do this?
It's a wild thing to put out there before a game, is to announce to the opposing team when the quarterback will be.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
But for UCF, the position group that UCF fans and media and everyone felt best about going into the season was the D-line. They had Ricky Barber and Lee Hunter and John Walker at D-tackle. They had Malachi Lawrence and Nigel E. Kelly. This was a group that literally thought this was going to be the best group of the team. And sure, John Walker's been hurt and hasn't played yet this year, but still, you don't expect a huge drop-off there. And we're through 4 games now. UCF was one of the last teams. I think they actually might be dead last in the nation in sacks. This is 2 straight games against Big 12 teams where they just have not been able to get any kind of meaningful pressure on the quarterback, and it's hurt them. And no, Graham Mertz is not extraordinary. He's not Shedeur Sanders, but if he is in a clean pocket and he has time, someone is going to be open. And UCF's been they had their pressers today. The line they were just hitting over and over again was, we have to find a way to get pressure on the quarterback. We have to find a way. We have to find a way. I don't necessarily know how likely it is to just magically find a way to do that if you haven't been able to do it through 2 games against Big 12 teams. So we will see, but that to me is the matchup that is the difference maker. If they cannot get pressure on Mertz, then it's going to be the same thing. It's going to be, they're allowing 41 points a game in their 2 Big 12 games, and that's going to continue if they can't find a way to do that.
Yeah, I don't know if they have to get exotic with blitzes and bring more guys or something, but UF doesn't love their offensive line from what I can tell. But they certainly think that it's probably on par with where Colorado's is, right? You think about the pressure that Shedeur's been under this year. For him to have that clean pocket, you mentioned that would be the difference in this game. That will be the difference in the Florida, or that was the difference in the Colorado game too. So before the year, we talked about how big this game was. If there was only one game UCF could win this year, it would probably be this one for fans. I don't know where Gus's mind would be on that. Maybe he'd think the same way, but he'd just never tell you. I still think it's big, maybe even bigger, coming off of a loss that you kind of expected, two touchdown favorite, even though we kind of thought that was a big spread. It might mean even more. But I do think that it probably means quite a bit to Florida too, to not lose to what they see as a little brother, or play for their coach's job. Like if they lose this, I would not be surprised at all if Billy Napier was fired after the game and going into Sunday based on the optics and how their season is going. They only have so many more chances for wins. And so if you lose this one, you're probably looking at a 4-win season, best case in Gainesville. And so I think they would just end up canning him, fairly soon after. And so not sure, I know it means a lot to both teams, but just talk to me about how big it is. And then I don't know, I know it's early in the week, Monday afternoon, but thoughts on how you think this thing ends up going.
Yeah, well, let me just say really quickly that last year Houston fired Dana Holgerson after the UCF game, and the year before that, Georgia Tech fired Jeff Collins after the UCF game. So UCF's on a little bit of a hot streak here, getting coaches fired, so just something to keep an eye on with this game. But yeah, I mean, the meaning has evolved in some ways because, this offseason, this was the game that the fan bases had circled. They've had this game circled for years. They haven't played in the Swamp since 2006, and back then UCF was they were in their second year in Conference USA. They'd been in the MAC before that. It was just a bye game. It was a nothing game, and they got blown out. And just the program has grown so much. Things have changed so much. They obviously beat Florida in the bowl game, but they want that win to go into the Swamp and say, we did this. And Gus has been open over the last, really this entire offseason about how this is big for recruiting. I mean, I know that Florida fans like to talk about how the bowl game win didn't count, and that's fine, bowls or whatever, but it did help in recruiting. It did make a difference for some players, and this would be a completely different ball game. And for UCF, it's funny because after the loss to Colorado, it has sort of taken on a different meaning of, yes, there's everything about establishing yourself as one of the Power 4 teams of the state and showing that you're on that level, but this is also an inflection point for the season as a whole because you're UCF. If you win this game, you're 4-1. You've got Cincinnati at home next to you. You feel like you can beat. Suddenly the season feels right back on the rails. You have a win in the Swamp. If you lose, and especially if you lose with another poor defensive performance, suddenly you're 3-2 and you haven't been able to stop any kind of Power 4 team. And things just kind of unravel from there. So as much as the meaning is there for establish yourself in Florida, it's also just, I don't think I would have imagined this offseason this would be a really critical game just for the course of UCF season, but that's exactly what it is. And as far as I think what's going to happen, I'm so torn on this one. I think I'm going to give the very, very narrow edge to UCF just because I feel like as far as program momentum, UCF still maybe has a little bit more to play for and is trying to right the ship here. And they've been pretty decent about bouncing back under Malzahn where Florida's kind of spiraling, but Florida does have that bye week. So I'm going to say a very, very tight win for UCF.
Yeah, I tried to do a little research and I saw Florida's 0-2 coming out of byes under Billy Napier. Both those were against Georgia, so I don't know how much you can read into it or not. It's not
just another one of those games. Yeah,
just they're just not prepared enough. So both against the number 1 team in the country. So I guess I won't hold that one against Napier too much. Christian, where can people follow you? Where can they find more of your work?
Yes, you can find me on Twitter at @CA Simmons. As far as my audio work, you can check out the Pegasus podcast if you're ever interested in hearing a little more about UCF. Wherever you get your podcast, Spotify, Apple Music, and you can find us on YouTube at Pegasus Podcast on YouTube.
Awesome, man. I appreciate you a ton for hanging out. I appreciate BetUS for their support. Again, go check them out. We will talk to you guys soon here at College Football Addiction.